Cruelty Squad's been making the rounds lately. Lots of well-liked people are saying positive things about it. At the same time, the game's bizarre and overwhelming presentation has been catnip for the headcases who make up these people's viewership. Me included. The first few moments of the starting level left quite the impression. After bumbling around for a minute or two and finding the front entrance to the target building, the game gives you a multi-sensory handshake. Despite this strong first showing, I was not having very much fun my first few hours with the game. I left my first session mildly annoyed and weirdly feverish. I have no idea why. Occam's razor suggests that the game was subliminally convincing me I was one of those Japanese honeybees. You know, the ones that clump together to microwave predators? And at the same time, it was triggering my fight or flight. As I put more time into the game, it grew a lot on me though. Cruelty Squad takes place in a low-poly, biopunk corporate hellscape. You play as a hitman, tracking down and eliminating people who have in one way or another offended the shadowy oligarchs who own them
and you.
The game's split up into isolated, replayable stages that you unlock as you progress. Each mission tasking you with tracking down and killing one to many targets, and then escaping. The targets themselves aren't very hard to deal with. They're usually unarmed NPCs who don't really react to your presence. You can and should talk to them, since they've got unique dialogue that's usually pretty high quality. The ones that are hostile aren't really any more difficult to fight than a regular enemy. The real challenge and core fun of the game is finding your way around. Every level has an abundance of alternative routes and secrets to find. Just look at the first mission. You got the front entrance, but also up to the left, there's vents you can go in to enter on the second floor. Alternatively, you can break through this big second-story window to get right to the second floor. Or again, alternatively, you can go around to the right side. You'll have to pass through a fence, either by platforming over it or blowing it up with an explosive if you have one on hand. This unlocks another passage that may take you
to the Shrine of the Silver Monkey.
The open-ended nature of the maps have made some people compare Cruelty Squad to Deus Ex or Hitman, referring to the game as a sort of light immersive sim. While the comparisons aren't really too far off, they did give me the idea I was supposed to be being sneaky, and that's probably why I didn't have a great time when I was first starting. While I'm sure it's possible to stealth missions, it doesn't seem like the game really wants you to. It's much easier just to blast everyone and sell their organs on the in-game marketplace. Most enemies in the game are guys with guns, and they behave a lot like Counter-Strike bots, which is to say they're pretty basic. They'll investigate sounds to find you, look at you for a second or two, and then blast you. You die very fast in this game. Depending on the weapon you're being hit with, one burst fire can end your run and make you restart the mission. There are no checkpoints. This does go both ways. One or two well-placed shots will make most human enemies evaporate into a handful of giblets and a turd plunk MP3. This is as good of a time as any to mention Cruelty Squad's unique reload control. In order to refill your gun, you've got to first hold down the right mouse button and then drag your mouse down. This was a little bit fiddly at first, but I ended up really enjoying it. The motion feels like you're reaching into your pocket to get more firecrackers to throw at mall cops. While I'm talking about quirks with the combat, I should mention how the game handles dying and death penalties. When you hit 0 HP, instead of immediately ragdolling, you get a 5-second countdown before your death. You can't heal out of this state as far as I know. It exists exclusively to make you panic, or to let you take revenge on whatever killed you. It really provides the authentic experience of succumbing to gunshot wounds that every gamer is looking for. Dying lowers your difficulty and changes your game's border. While you're in the starting difficulty, you can open a handful of secret doors that are otherwise locked, but that's about it. There's like 3 of them. Getting your difficulty back up also feels kinda lame. You get it back once every time you clear a stage for the first time with punishment mode enabled. There's like another difficulty modifier. And there's also a very well-hidden way to get it back infinitely early on. Then, the final mission has a pickup at the very start that's not really hidden at all. You can just load up the map, pick it up, quit out, and keep it. Difficulty restores go from needlessly limited relative to what the difficulty actually does for you, to abundant to the point of the system feeling kind of pointless. There's some post-game stuff you do with the difficulty system, but during your initial playthrough, it feels very half-baked, which is weird because the entire border of your game at all times is indicating the difficulty. You'd think it'd do more. Back to enemies. Outside of the firearm-wielding guards, you've got an assortment of inhuman freaks to shoot, like these little toxic meat creatures, woman with knife, and psychics who mess with your FOV.
Nightmare, 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 nightmare.
The weirder enemies are mostly in the later levels, but they can sometimes show up in earlier missions at random. You've also got some other random elements like weather and the items you can find on tables at any given time. These little changes help spice up your different stage runs, which is welcome, since you have to play each mission multiple times to find secrets, grind money for upgrades, and try to get well acquainted enough with each map to S-rank them. Overall, the game's got a really nice progression to it. As you find or buy upgrades, you'll be able to use them to improve your clear times as well as get to more places that you wouldn't previously. Many of which will have even more items that help you get to even more places, and sometimes you'll find entire secret levels contained in Mario 64 paintings. Let's go! Cruelty Squad reminds me of when I used to spend a lot of time exploring abstract Gmod maps. There's a unique feeling that the space you're exploring doesn't follow the usual rules other game worlds have to. It feels less curated, more off the walls and raw. It's like the difference between reading a published book that had an editor and flipping through a demented person's personal journal. If you're either on the fence about Cruelty Squad or already enjoyed exploring its environments and want something similar, I highly recommend you check out Nipper's Counter-Strike source maps. Each one's a collection of these little connected abstract scenes, peppered with invisible looping music players. You won't really be fighting anything or completing puzzles in a linear order like a video game level. You just wander around and gawk to your heart's content. They're a bit old, but hold up just fine for the most part. There's a good number of them too, all named after a vague utterance like ugh or blah. With the semi-recent mass obsession with liminal spaces, I won't be surprised when these get dug up and you start seeing videos of people dancing to Little Dark Age on DM_. Yeah! Quick disclaimer, there is nudity on the maps if you know where to find it, just like any other real-life location. And also there's seizure-inducing flashing colors on some of them. Yeah, you've been warned, be careful. If you got both Gmod and CS Source, you can find these maps on the Gmod Workshop. Both Nipper's maps and Cruelty Squad have this rawness that makes exploring its environments feel much more like you're actually exploring a place rather than just playing a video game level, if that makes any sense. They're nonsensical doo-doo meat hell kind of places, but distinct from how a game level usually feels. This makes navigating the maps feel much more genuine and also fairly horrifying, since there's no real way to predict what you're going to run into next. Cruelty Squad's presentation is one of its most standout aspects. Its setting is biopunk, which is like cyberpunk except replace all the cybernetic augments with grafting on additional organs and giving yourself new orifices. It's disgusting. Pretty much all upgrades are intrusive and humiliating. If you want to become more powerful, you'll have to become a rancid goo-spewing freak. It's like the humiliation of being made to wear a uniform to work, scaled up to 1 billion, and then inflicted on every part of your body at once. The game's graphics are low poly, with zany textures. You can more or less tell what everything's supposed to be, and there's lots of high-quality faces, both on the NPCs and the walls. Skyboxes range from looking apocalyptic to looking like the levels are taking place inside of a shotgun slug someone brained a clown with. The UI takes some getting used to, but it's mostly intuitive after a little squinting. Most icons do what you'd imagine, like the Earthworm Ouroboros restarts levels. The only real standout is the play button. Looks like a frogman going. You'd expect the usual, right-facing arrow icon, or something similar to that, for the sake of consistency. It could be that this is just what the play button will look like in the future. Eventually people get so used to YouTubers doing blow-up doll faces in their thumbnails, that face just becomes synonymous with starting a video. You can draw a lot of different conclusions and interpretations from the game's themes and writing. There's a ton of stimulation being radiated at you at any given point, and dozens of different ways to frame whatever you're looking at. Everyone's going to come out of this game thinking different things. It's a bit disjointed at times. The final ending of the game has a quote by a French philosopher talking about how anything that takes in energy to grow will find some way to lose excess energy if it can't find a use for it. Juxtapose this with a key part of Cruelty Squad's setting being that nobody can die. Technology got to the point where everyone can just be brought back, even the targets you kill. I assume that's the key part of why you're seeing this meat hell biopunk stuff going on. There's an excess in energy in the form of life, and there's attempts to utilize it for growth and development, but since nothing can actually die, the excess can't ever actually be properly spent or lost. All living things are free to mutate into freaks, because there are no consequences. There's no fail-state. Evolving into a flesh wall is just as viable as evolving opposable thumbs because there's nothing to be viable for. There's no goal because there's no way to lose. Existence becomes a race to the bottom with no finish line. So in short, death is good, actually. Or maybe that's just my interpretation because this game makes you want to die after a while.